here from the more updated news, but I think it would be great if it was, because it captures something about what these things have in common without putting a label of pathology on top. So I think of body-focused repetitive behaviors in two different ways. And some of my clients kind of relate to one way of thinking of it, and some relate to the other way of thinking of it. So I'm going to give you both. And one is that body-focused behaviors can serve as action symptoms. What this means is all that mucky, internal, messy stuff that we have inside that we don't know necessarily how to fix. We all have that. There are ways that we all find to externalize problems in a manner that they can be temporarily solved. So where I might not know what to do with my anxiety, I know what to do with a pimple. I can pop it. I can feel satisfaction. So in that way, we can think of body-focused repetitive behaviors as ways of coping with problems that are a lot harder to solve. Another way to think about body-focused repetitive behaviors is as an over-grooming behavior. So if we think about plucking hairs, kind of maybe popping a pimple or two here and there, that's a part of regular grooming. We all do it. I don't know anyone who's never popped a pimple or tweezed a hair. But once it goes into a level where we don't have as much control over it, we're not just doing it for grooming purposes, we can call it over-grooming. We can learn a lot about these behaviors if we look at what happens with over-grooming in animals. They also groom naturally, and under certain conditions, over-groom. So you've probably all seen a dog or a cat or a horse doing some of those behaviors, like licking off all their fur, and or even sometimes birds can pluck off their feathers. Horses can do different things. They can bite their flanks. All of those happen in certain conditions, and that's really important. Some of the conditions that animals tend to overgroom are the same conditions that my clients find as triggers. This can include feeling trapped, either in too small of a space or emotionally. It can include feeling invaded. I know once I got too close to a group of birds, and suddenly there they were kind of over-grooming, and I had to move away, take their cue. And other things can be lack of stimulation, lack of social contact, and kind of an inability to get out some frustration. That's when horses tend to bite their flanks, when they don't have enough aggressive play with other horses. So just in terms of who does this tend to apply to? Who tends to be suffering from body-focused repetitive behaviors? Some of this is anecdotal. In terms of, I've been working with this population in my private practice pretty exclusively for 5 years, and I found a lot of similarities. And one is that there seems to be some underlying difficulty with sensory processing. So there's studies being done about what the genetic component might be to the disorder, and I think they'll find that it has something to do with sensory processing. Can't tell you the number of my clients who have told me that as children they didn't like the feeling of the tags on the back of their clothing, or the lining on their socks had to be lined up just right. Also, there's an emotional sensitivity, which has, some difficult parts. It's hard to be emotionally sensitive. You tend to pick up whatever's in the house or environment, and sometimes you can become the scapegoat because you're the one feeling things that are unspoken. It has some really positive parts. A lot of my clients are very attuned to animals and have the closest relationships with the animals in their households. So they tend to be, it's largely female, tends to onset around puberty. And what I've noticed is that my clients tend to be higher than average as far as intelligence goes, but possibly with some learning, some place that's difficult for them as far as learning goes. Again, the number of people who start pulling out their hair in a difficult math class is really noticeable when you go around and find out when was the first hair pulled. It could be trouble with spelling. And it seems that throughout life, kind of school difficulties can really be triggers for pulling. Okay, so moving on to the intersection with OCD. When when trichotillomania was first kind of introduced into the Index Medicus, before that it was introduced into the DSM, it was introduced as an obsessive-compulsive neurosis. Once it was moved into the DSM, it was moved as an impulse control disorder. There's a lot of confusion because it has elements of both. It has the element of impulse control disorder in that it's kind of like an itch that you need to scratch. When there's a hair that's out of place, or a pimple that needs to be popped, or a scab that needs to be gotten off, that is a very impulsive piece of the disorder. There are also some obsessive pieces in terms of the behavior tends to be very ritualistic in terms of pulling out the hair, what you do with the hair. There's usually a visual part and also an oral part of what it feels like if you rub it on your lips. Same thing with scabs and other pieces of nail biting. Same thing. Sometimes it's what you do with the nail as well as just getting the nail off. So each person tends to have their own ritual. Different than OCD though, pleasure is a part of the process for at least 80% of the people who engage in body-focused behaviors. There's a real sense of pleasure and relief when you get that hair or you get that pimple, and then it might be followed by, pretty quickly by some regret, but that pleasure and relief doesn't tend to be as much a part of other obsessive-compulsive behaviors. Okay, and when I was thinking about the myths of trichotillomania and skin picking, I was thinking about kind of a way that I practice that's a little bit different than the way that that a lot of people in this field tend to practice. What I've noticed in reading other literature and going to trainings with other professionals through the Trichotillomania Learning Center is that a lot of professionals view the behaviors as just a problem to get rid of. And so if it's just a problem to get rid of, the focus is going to be on the symptom and controlling it. And then success looks like getting rid of it. For me, what I found is that we learn a lot about ourselves if we can look at some of the unmet needs that the behavior is soothing. So rather than taking it away from clients, I really like to understand it deeply and help clients to respect what it has done for them in their lives, because it has helped them to cope in many ways with maybe sensory difficulties and whatever difficulties get piled on top. So one of my clients framed this issue in a beautiful way. She does both the picking and the pulling, and called these behaviors combined her blanket with thorns. So powerful, and it makes it so clear. Nobody wants their blanket to be torn away, and I don't want to tear away anybody's blanket. I want to help somebody look at, why is this blanket so important to me? And then I also want to look at, how do these thorns affect me? What's the balance here? Is it helping me or is it hurting me? And where's the balance? And then when there's enough understanding of what the needs are that are being